This is Mike from the Shopsmith forum, and I want to go ahead and demonstrate how to reinstall a Shopsmith Model 10 quill return spring back into its housing. At first, that's all I was going to worry about showing here, and I got to thinking, well, maybe there's someone out there that would like to know how to take that spring out of the housing without damaging it. So the method I'm about to show is the method I've used for quite some time now. I'm sure there's probably another way to do this. That's fine. Whatever works for each individual is what works for them. But this way here, I've done it. Had good success with it. What you do is you clamp your spring housing in between some pieces of wood in your vise. You want to take the quill feed pinion shaft. You want to go ahead and rotate it counterclockwise, about 3.5 turns, so you can crank the tension up on your spring, so you can collapse it down some. You got to remember to hold to this shaft because it's got a lot of tension on there right now. Go ahead and take a straight blade screwdriver and wedge it down in the second row of your spring wire. Then using a pair of channel lock pliers, wedge them down in there, clamp it, pull your screwdriver out. That pinion shaft has tension on it, so you need to slowly release that and let it relax. Now you can pull the whole assembly out. You've got it out of the housing. So you just go ahead and release the spring from the pin. Now remember, this spring is under quite a bit of tension right now, so you want to go ahead and handle that carefully. Go ahead and take the housing out. You want to put your quill feed pinion shaft back in. I generally leave it about 1.5 inch pinion shaft out, so you're far enough away from the vise that it's not going to interfere with what you've got to handle here. Lock it down nice and tight. Now go ahead and put gloves on for this, since we are working with a spring that's under tension. You can get sliced by it, or the tang could cut into you. Now grip that with your thumb and hold that nice and tight. Pop your pliers off of it and slowly let that spring uncoil to where it relaxes. Okay, so say you had a spring, something happened to it, it popped out on you, or you pulled it out somehow, you've got it out, or you had to do a repair to it, and now you're trying to figure out how to get that spring back in. Okay, if you weren't really paying close attention before you pulled it out, there's two ways you can do this. You could end up trying to put it on the quill feed pinion shaft with the tang facing towards you, or you can do it with it facing away from you. You do not want it this way. You want it to where that tang is facing away from you. You go ahead and put it on the shaft. Get your pin locked in. Now you're on the pin, you're locked in on the pin. And what you need to do is you need to rotate this back towards you to wind it tight. Okay, now as you're doing this, obviously you're building spring tension. The spring is going to have a tendency to want to start rocking back and forth on you like that, and at the same time is trying to rewind back out of your hand. So you need to make sure you got a firm grip on this. I generally do 3 to 3.5 turns back to tighten this spring up. So right there is relaxed. What we do is just go ahead and start winding her back. There's 1 turn. There's 2. It's getting tight now. There's 3. Now grab that tang with your thumb and hold that tang. We got a lot of pressure on this right now. Take your screwdriver, get it back into that second row of spring wire. Go ahead and get your locking pliers. Wedge them down in there. Clamp them. Take your screwdriver out. Now you've got your spring held nice and tight. Sometimes these just pop right off. Other times you gotta take, oh, that one came off on its own. Thought it had come off. Take your pick and stick it in there and pop her loose. And there you've got your spring wound. There again, or once again, it's under tension, so you want to handle that very carefully. You grab your housing, hold the slot at the top in your hand, put that spring in there, take your thumb, push the tang to get it to re-engage in that slot. Now with the locking pliers in there, it will have a tendency to hold that spring cocked out at a little bit of an angle. So most cases you are not going to be able to get that spring tang to seat totally in that slot. So what you do is just hold the spring housing like this and go ahead and pop the pliers. Get your pliers out. Now you got your spring back in. The spring is riding up a little high there. Just go ahead and reinsert it back onto the quill feed pinion shaft. You usually need, sometimes it'll pop right back on, other times you gotta take a pick. Just pick the spring up a little bit and get it over the pin. Okay, so now we're back on. To seat the spring totally or completely, you just crank the housing back towards you 2 to 2.5 turns. So there's 2. Going around to about 2.5. You can't see it, you may not be able to see it with the camera shot here because it's on the bottom side. You take your thumb and push. Let me see if I can pull it up a little bit higher here. There we go. That way I was able to use my index finger. Anyway, I slid the spring back over. That last outer band is locked back on. Totally seated in that slot. Now you gotta slowly let that spring housing rewind so it will relax itself. Just let her go around to where she's back in. And that's all there is to it. You've got your spring back in your housing. You didn't damage the spring. You're locked back onto your shaft. All you gotta do is just put your retaining collar back on, your gauge collar, and of course your snap ring. And that's all there is to putting a quill feed return spring back in the housing. Like I said, I'm sure there may be another way to do it. What works for someone, that's the way to do it. Like I said in the beginning, I've done quite a few of these over the years. I've never had a spring break on me. I've never had one be distorted. It's fairly safe. You're locked back on. Now you're ready to go ahead and reinsert your quill feed pinion shaft back into the headstock. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. Hopefully it was helpful to you. And that's it.